On October 14, Australians will vote on whether to put an Indigenous voice into our Constitution, and the Daily Oz is here to answer all your questions. We've already taken a look at where the idea of a voice came from and how it was developed and debated. But now it's time to turn to the politics. First, a quick refresher. In 2015, a council is established to work towards a referendum on constitutional recognition for First Nations people, an idea with broad support. But when that council speaks to First Nations people, a clear message comes back. They don't want symbolic recognition, they want something practical. They want a voice. That message is reflected in the Uluru Statement from the Heart. The council sends the message back to Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, but one council member has doubts. Former Liberal politician Amanda Vanstone. She tells the PM what was intended to be a unifying and progressive move forward could turn into a lightning rod for discontent. Hearing those words 6 years later, they sound almost like a prophecy for the politically charged debate that we're having today. That's getting ahead of ourselves. Back in 2017, Turnbull rejects the voice, saying it would be viewed as a third chamber of Parliament. Turnbull agreed to commission work on the possible details of a voice, but it looked doomed to sit on the shelf. Then, in 2022, the government changed. In his victory speech on election night, new Prime Minister Anthony Albanese began with the voice.
I commit to the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full.
Why did you start there and why was it so significant to you?
Because it's important that we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land here. We share this continent with the oldest continuous culture on Earth. That is a source of great pride.
The Albanese government started pulling together the pieces for a referendum. At first, it looked like there might be broad political support. Peter Dutton appointed Julian Leeser to be his shadow minister for Indigenous Affairs. Leeser was a long-term supporter of the voice. And in August of 2022, 64% of Australians said they were likely to support a voice. But soon a sticking point emerged over the question of detail.
There's not enough detail about it.
Now here's where we're about to get into the political weeds, and before we do that, it's really important to be clear about the difference between the Constitution and normal laws. What we're voting on October 14 is a change to the Constitution. That's our national rule book. Constitution would require that a voice must exist and that it must be able to give advice, but everything else would be left for Parliament to establish under normal laws, the same way it does everything else. Questions like how many members are on the voice and how they are chosen, those would be worked out by law.
This is the nature of the Constitution. It doesn't do that detail. That's through legislation. All it does, a Constitution, is provide for the power, if you like, for that to happen. It says we'll have a defence force. It doesn't say how many people will be in it. It doesn't say how many tanks Australia shall have or what planes the Air Force should fly.
The Albanese government chose not to reveal all its plans for those details. Instead, it published a list of principles. It included that the members of the voice would be chosen by local communities, that they would be gender balanced, and that there would be representation for young people. The voice wouldn't handle any money and it wouldn't deliver any programs, and it wouldn't have the power to override Parliament. But Peter Dutton said that this left too many questions unanswered.
We haven't yet seen the final form of what it is the government's going to propose. That's a reasonable question to ask.
It's been consistent messaging from the Coalition. Here's Coalition Senator Jane Hume.
It doesn't explain what the model is that we will be using for a voice to Parliament. We don't know how it's going to be constituted, who will be on it, what powers it has, what powers it doesn't have. And while we say, don't worry, we'll take care of all of that later on, that's not good enough for the Constitution.
There is wording in there that says that the powers of the voice will be decided by Parliament. In what way are you worried that the wording will bind the Parliament in any way if it says that Parliament has the power to decide what the voice should look like?
Well, it will be a very powerful body. There is no doubt about that. But we don't know how it will be powerful.
Well, but it's, again, the wording says that Parliament can set its powers. So where does the power from the voice come, in your view, in that wording?
So you're essentially asking the Australian people to fundamentally change the Constitution. And they're saying then trust the Parliament to build something afterwards. Why wouldn't the Parliament build something beforehand?
The No campaign have been talking about everything but what the question is. It's not changing the way our parliament functions or the way government functions. What we're talking about here is an advisory group that will have the power of its ideas, but won't have the power of veto, won't have the power to fund programs. And that's why there's nothing to fear here. That's why this is such a positive, generous proposal from Indigenous Australians.
If there is nothing to fear in that bill, what harm could there be from releasing that and answering all those questions now?
Because it's not my bill, it's the Parliament's bill.
But the government is likely to introduce a bill.
No, the Parliament will do that, and will work across the Parliament, work with Indigenous Australians. What Australians are being asked to do is put the principle in there. It then is, importantly, up to the Parliament, and it will change over time, as it should, as do other laws. This is no different.
The longer the conversation about details went on, the clearer it became that Peter Dutton was leaning towards no. But it was the Nationals who became the first party to officially oppose the voice. One of their newest senators, Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, argued the voice was divisive.
Why should I, as an Indigenous Australian, be governed under a separate entity than the rest of Australia?
A few months later, Peter Dutton officially joined the No campaign. His Indigenous Affairs spokesperson Julian Leeser quit and was replaced by Price. Dutton also began to describe the voice as divisive.
The Prime Minister is dividing our country, and the Liberal Party seeks to unite our country.
Unfortunately, this became a political issue. We didn't choose to take it that way. That was a decision of the Labor government and of Anthony Albanese specifically, and he cut the coalition out of the conversation.
Do you regret that you weren't able to get bipartisan support for this referendum? No referendum succeeded without that before.
It's unfortunate. I went out of my way to try to do that. Peter Dutton, of course, walked out on the apology, didn't just oppose it being given. He said earlier this year that he regretted doing that. He acknowledged that there was no downside. There will be no downside from a yes vote in this referendum, just an upside. Just like before marriage equality, you might recall people being told that existing marriages would be undermined. Well, that hasn't happened. The fear campaign was not valid, and the fear campaign here is not valid.
If you don't know,
On the other side of politics, the Greens were also having difficulty working out their position on the voice. Their Indigenous Affairs spokesperson was Senator Lydia Thorpe, who had walked out of Uluru in 2017. Lydia Thorpe quit the Greens over her stance on the voice. The political battle lines were drawn. In the early months, the No campaign gained a lot of ground. Support for the voice in opinion polls has dropped to well below 50%. To succeed, the referendum will need 50% nationwide and 50% in at least 4 states, a result that every opinion poll suggests will not happen. We wake up on October the 15th that it is a no. Is that something you'll take personal responsibility for? What will the path forward look like?
Well, I've given Australians the opportunity to have their say, and I'm very hopeful that Australians will vote yes, to lift our whole country up.
I think on the 15th of October, we're going to feel very bruised. Whatever the outcome is, the nation will be bruised, and it didn't have to be this way. That's why I respectfully say no, but I also regretfully say no.